Hello there, everybody, and welcome to this German GCSE and iGCSE video tutorial. So in this tutorial, we're going to look at the case system, which is another tricky aspect or potentially tricky aspect of German GCSE and iGCSE grammar. There are four cases in German. I'll go through each of these, the differences between them, which you do need to be as clear on as possible when you use each of these, and more. So it should be very valuable. Okay, just to introduce myself first, I'm Dhananjay Talwar. I studied French and Italian, modern languages, of course, for my MA degree at the University of Cambridge. And since graduating in 2015, I've been mostly an educator, particularly a full-time tutor, which I've been doing for at least 6 years now. And yeah, I chose that for a good reason because I'm really passionate about languages, and I've learned more than 20 of them to different levels, at least 9 of those to fluency, including German, of course, which I did for GCSE before then improving afterwards. So yeah, it's something, learning languages is something I really love to do. It's likely to always be a hobby for me. And likewise, transmitting that passion to my students is something I really enjoy, and helping them to get to their target grades, and giving them the techniques to allow that to happen too. So I've helped over 500 students up till now to achieve or exceed their target grade for language GCSE or iGCSE exams as a full-time tutor. And yeah, that's something I'm very much looking forward to continuing. I've taught 8 languages so far to GCSE level and some at higher levels too. Now, these here are the German GCSE and iGCSE exam boards. Again, there are differences from one exam board to the next. So do make a note of which exam board you're studying, and do try and tailor your preparation accordingly as well. You don't want to use just material for the wrong exam board, because that's ultimately not going to be the most beneficial for you. But the good thing is that today we are looking at a part of German grammar, something that many students can struggle with at German GCSE and iGCSE level, which is the case system. So no matter which of these exam boards you're taking, this should be very useful for you, because all German students for GCSE and iGCSE will need to know about the case system, how these different cases work exactly, how to differentiate between them and how to use them, and so on. So let's get into that. So German is the same language family, of course, as English. They're both Germanic, but German has a case system, which is completely different, of course, to English. English doesn't have different cases at all. And there are other languages out there which have even more. Most Slavic languages will have 6, even 7. Finnish apparently has something like 18 cases. So it might feel like this is a nightmare for many students who are learning for German for GCSE. But remember that it could be worse. There are 4 cases in German, so perhaps not too bad. Those are the nominative, accusative, genitive, and dative. So you need to know what all of those cases are, when to use each of them, and just to be as clear as possible about the differences between them. So cases are used primarily for nouns and adjectives, and the definite and indefinite article. The definite article is the formal title for the word meaning the, and the indefinite article refers to the word meaning or an. Both of those definite and indefinite articles, of course, they have many different potential forms in German, whereas in English they're far simpler. So all of those can have different cases, and a few other categories of words can have different cases too in German. The case in German indicates the function of that word in the sentence, or the relationship with other words in the sentence. Every language has the code for these functions or the role of that word in a sentence in some way. Different languages do this in different ways. English, for example, relies on word order more. So in English, if you say the dog bites the man, we know that it's the dog doing the biting because the dog comes first in the sentence and the man comes afterwards. In German, however, word order can potentially actually be a bit more flexible because they've got this case system instead. And this case system is what codes for, or what indicates what the role of certain words like nouns, adjectives, and so on, what their role is or what their function is in that particular sentence. As we'll see here. Um, the ending of, the word such as, if it was der Mann, for example, that means that the man is doing something. It's in the nominative, masculine singular. If it were den Mann, that would be something being done to the man, because that would be the object of the sentence in the accusative case. So in that way, the case system in German helps us to tell what the role is of that particular noun or adjective and so on. There are 4 cases now in German, and the nominative is the first of those, generally the first that people learn. That's used for the subject of the sentence. I'll go into more detail on this later, but the subject of the sentence, grammatical subject, of course, this refers to, basically means the person or thing doing the action. The accusative case is the opposite, opposite to the nominative case. So that is used for the direct object of the sentence. In other words, the person or thing doing that the action is being done to. So the grammatical subject of a sentence is the person or thing doing the action, and the direct object in a sentence, grammatically, is the person or thing that the action is done to. The genitive case is used mainly to show possession, and the dative case is used mainly for the indirect object of the sentence, to or for somebody or something, in other words. But we will go through all of these now in more detail, one by one. Just to show you quickly here, this is a chart that many people will try and learn for German GCSE or iGCSE, and many people will be shown in school, which tells you how der, die, das, the word for the in German, changes according to the gender, masculine, feminine, or neuter, number, whether it's singular or plural, and case, nominative, accusative, genitive, or dative. This is the stuff of nightmares for many GCSE German students, because it can feel like a real mountain to climb to learn all of this by heart. But if you're able to do so once you've done that, it does feel a lot easier. You'll be much more familiar with the typical endings associated with certain genders, with certain cases, and so on, and how those are conveyed or how those are shown in German. So it can take some effort, but can be really helpful if you're able to memorize these over time as well. You will see the same patterns come up fairly often in German. Okay, now we'll look in a bit more detail at the nominative case, first of all. So the subject of a sentence, the grammatical subject of a sentence, is the person or thing doing the action. There are examples here. So the dog bites the man. In that sentence, it's the dog that is the subject, because the dog is the one that's doing the biting. If we were to reverse the word order in English, the subject would change. For example, the man bites the dog. That would mean that the man is the subject, because the man would be the one doing the biting. Obviously, most of the time, it should be this way around, if anything. The dog bites the man rather than the man bites the dog. But whoever is doing the biting, they would be the subject, because they're the one doing the action or of the verb in the sentence. In German, whoever or whatever that subject is, the grammatical subject is of a clause or sentence, that should always go in the nominative case. As in these examples, der Mann arbeitet, the man is working, that's the nominative singular masculine. Die Frau wohnt in Deutschland, the woman lives in Germany. Die Frau is nominative case and singular and feminine, meaning the woman. Das Kind geht in die Schule, the child goes to school. Das Kind is a neuter noun, so that's nominative singular neuter. And then in the plural, die Bücher sind rot. That's one plural example, meaning the books are red. That die Bücher is the nominative plural, meaning the books. And in the plural, in German, luckily, there's no distinction in terms of gender. So you don't need to think about whether a noun is masculine, feminine, or neuter when you're dealing with the plural in German, because they all follow the same pattern as each other, regardless of gender, at least in the plural. That's not the case in the singular. But that does help because it means you've got less to learn, less to memorize, at least when it comes to plural forms for German. So, yeah, I suppose the usage of the nominative case should hopefully be fairly simple. It's really getting your head around the concept of the grammatical subject of a clause or sentence. The grammatical subject being the person or thing doing the action of the verb in that sentence. Here, for example, the man is doing the working, therefore it's the subject. Who is it that lives in Germany? It's the woman, therefore the woman is the subject of the sentence and should go in the nominative case. That's a useful way to think of it too. And as long as you understand that idea of the subject, the nominative case, or understanding when to use the nominative can be more simple. Okay, the accusative case, on the other hand, is generally the opposite of the nominative case. So the object or the direct object of a sentence is the person or thing that the action is done to. And in German, the direct object of a clause must go in the accusative case. So whereas the nominative case is used for the subject of a sentence, the grammatical object of a sentence goes in the accusative case. Whereas in English or in many languages, these could be marked through word order or in different ways. German uses the case system to show who's doing what in a sentence or clause. Again, we can take the same example, the dog bites the man. Here we're looking at the man. The man here is the one being bitten. Obviously, it's the dog that's doing the biting. So the dog, as we've already said, is the subject of the sentence. And the man would be the object because he's the one being bitten. So in grammatical terms, the man would be the object of that mini sentence. And in that sentence in German, the man would, of course, therefore have to go in the accusative case. It would be den Mann, accusative singular, rather than der Mann, which shows quite clearly the role of the man in that sentence. So that's how the case system illustrates, the relationship of certain words compared to other words in the sentence, or what their role is in a sentence. So in German, the object of a clause or sentence always goes in the accusative case, as in these examples. Das Kind isst einen Apfel. Einen Apfel is in the accusative singular and Apfel is masculine. That means the child eats an apple. Der Mann liebt die Frau. The man loves the woman. Die Frau is in the accusative singular and Frau, meaning woman, is feminine. Die Frau liebt das Kind. The woman loves the child. Child is a neuter noun in German, das Kind. So that is an example of the accusative singular neuter form. The accusative singular in feminine and in neuter actually look exactly the same as the nominative singular for feminine and for neuter, respectively. Those two don't change. The masculine form, accusative singular, does change. That is different. The masculine accusative singular is different to the nominative masculine singular form. As you can see here, it would be ein Apfel or der Apfel in the nominative singular, and it becomes den Apfel or einen Apfel in the accusative masculine singular. So there is a change there, but not in the accusative feminine singular, not in the accusative neuter singular, or even in the accusative plural. So in the plural, this example is ich sehe die Leute, I see the people. That's an example of the accusative plural, and as before, there's no distinction based on gender for the plural, at least in German, which makes it a bit easier. You'll notice in these examples, but you should notice that all of the words or all of the phrases that are in bold, einen Apfel, die Frau, das Kind, die Leute, and the equivalents in English, an apple, the woman, the child, the people, they're all the people or things that are having something done to them. In the first example, the apple is not eating anything or anyone, the apple is being eaten. Therefore, it's the object of the sentence because something is being done to it, and therefore it must go in the accusative case. That's the reason why it has to go in the accusative. In the second example, the woman doesn't love anybody, or the woman doesn't necessarily feel love for anybody or anything else. But according to what we're told, the man loves the woman. Therefore, the woman is the object of the sentence and therefore must go in the accusative case. That's to illustrate how the accusative works, which is very much tied to this notion of the grammatical object of a clause or a sentence. Now we move on to the genitive case. The genitive case is perhaps the least important for GCSE or iGCSE German. So if there is a case that you wanted to gloss over, I would go through the genitive as well. But if it's getting complicated and you want to pay less attention than perhaps to one of the cases, then perhaps you could get away with that for the genitive case. But it's still worth making a note of and being aware of, I would say, even for GCSE, though it can come up less often. The genitive case essentially translates as of somebody or something in English. And if you think about it that way, it's usually going to be much easier to understand and use, most likely. The genitive case is usually used to indicate who or what something belongs to, so to show possession, in other words. In English, for example, we'd say the man's house, meaning, the house belonging to the man. In German, though, they would express it differently. So the person the thing is owned by, here the man in that particular example, would go in the genitive case. So in German, they'd have a sentence something like the house of the man. And instead of using a preposition for of, you could simply put the man, the owner of the owner of the object, into the genitive case. That's how it would often be done in German. You can use a preposition instead. You can use the preposition von, which often translates as of, followed by the dative case. But it's perhaps slightly more common in German to use the genitive case instead to show possession. There's another rule here which is important to learn, to memorize as much as you can, and which can cause difficulty, which is that in German, even the noun that goes into the genitive case must add an s or es at the end if it's masculine or neuter singular. Only for masculine singular nouns and neuter singular nouns is that rule true. And that tells us that every masculine singular noun or neuter singular noun, when they're in the genitive case, they have to end in s or es. So they would add either just the letter s or es accordingly. If the noun ends in a vowel already, you generally just add an s. If the noun ends in a consonant, you'd normally add an es. That's one of the very few occasions where the noun, the German noun itself, actually changes. Otherwise, what we've been talking about and referring to are changes in the words preceding the noun, the words coming in front of the noun in German. But in the genitive case, for masculine and neuter singular, the noun itself must also be altered. So that's something to be really careful of, to make sure you remember it whenever you produce these kinds of sentences yourself. And to recognize it in reading and listening too. Here are some examples of the genitive case to see how it works. Der Koffer des Mannes. It translates as literally as something like the suitcase, which is in the nominative case, of the man. But in English, we're most likely to say the man's suitcase. So that's an example of the genitive masculine singular. Or das Auto meiner Schwester. So das Auto is again in the nominative. Meine Schwester, that's genitive singular, feminine, which would mean the car of my sister or my sister's car. Die Spielzeuge des Kindes means the child's toys, literally the toys of the child, and that is genitive neuter singular. You can see there that in the masculine singular genitive example, the standard noun in German is Mann, ending in M, which is M-A-N-N, and they've added es at the end to fit this rule. Because even the noun in the genitive case, if it's masculine or neuter singular, must add an s or es at the end to show that it's in the genitive singular. And likewise with a neuter singular noun, normally it would be Kind, the normal noun, K-I-N-D. Here they've added es again for the same reason to fit with this rule. because it's a neuter singular noun, you have to add an s or es to the end of the noun if it's in the genitive case. And one example for the plural too, which is die Partys der Freunde, the parties of the friends, so the friends' parties. That's genitive plural. These can appear tricky, particularly at the start, so do make sure to revise them. Go back over parts of the video if anything seems unclear. And use various examples and practice until it starts to feel more like second nature. Okay, now we move on to, thankfully, the last of the cases, which is the dative case. Now, this is still pretty important for GCSE and iGCSE. The dative case is used to indicate the indirect object of a sentence in German. The way I would think of it, which is generally easier, I think, is that it normally translates as to or for somebody or something in English. So when you want to say of somebody or something, you would normally use the genitive case in German. And if you want to say to or for somebody or something, you generally use the dative case in German. In English, we would say to, and then the person or the thing you're talking about. But in German, they would simply put whatever comes after in the dative case. So in English, we would say something like, I give a gift to my friend. In German, instead, they would take away that preposition to, and the noun, my friend, it would normally go in the dative case instead. So that's how they would indicate to or for something, which could also be thought of or referred to as the indirect object of a sentence or clause. And again, there's a rule here, an extra rule that affects the noun itself, not just the words preceding the noun, which is that in the dative plural in German, even the noun must add the letter N or EN at the end, as in one of the examples here. And that's true for any gender because gender is irrelevant in the plural in German. There's no distinction by gender for the plural, at least in German. So if you're dealing with a dative plural, you must remember to stick an N or EN onto the end of the noun, onto the end of the German noun as well. So here are some examples. Ich gebe das Buch dem Mann. I give the book to the man. So the first four words, ich gebe das Buch, means I give the book. And then dem Mann is the dative masculine singular form, which effectively here means to the man. So instead of having to, the word for to, followed by the person who it's been given to, they would simply put the recipient, the person who's receiving this thing, into the dative case instead in German. Ich gebe das Buch meiner Schwester, meaning I give the book to my sister. Meine Schwester is in the dative singular, and that's a feminine noun. Ich gebe das Buch dem Kind, meaning I give the book to the child. That's an example of the dative singular for neuter nouns. And ich gebe das Buch meinen Freunden means I give the book to my friends. That's an example of the dative plural. And you can see here that Freund would be friend, Freunde, ending in E would be friends. And here we have had to add an extra N onto Freunde as well to show that it fits this rule and to show that it's in the dative plural. Because in the dative plural, even the noun must add an N or en. So it becomes Freunden, as in that sentence, which means I give the book to my friends. Like I said, this can take a bit of time to get your head around, and it usually requires a fair bit of practice, naturally, too. Now I want to mention cases after prepositions. So different prepositions in German. Prepositions are normally small words that often indicate the location or position of something, like in, to, for, by, with, from, at, and so on in English. Those would all count as prepositions, and there are similar ones in German too. And in German, different prepositions take different cases. So there are certain prepositions that are simply followed by the accusative case, like für, durch, gegen, and ohne, for example. Für meaning for, durch, through, gegen, against. Can have several meanings, can mean around, for example, ohne, without, all of those prepositions, the word or the noun that comes afterwards, must go in the accusative case. For example, es ist für meinen Freund. It's for my friend. Meinen Freund is the one that goes in the accusative case. The preposition itself doesn't change, but the words after will change their case according to whatever case that preposition dictates or that preposition must take. So für is a preposition taking the accusative case, so the words following it must go in the accusative case. Other prepositions are followed by the dative case. That can be still fairly common in German. Some examples of these, particularly for GCSE, are mit, with, nach, often meaning after, aus, often out or out of, seit, since, von, of, zu, which can mean many things, to or at, for example, bei, which can mean at the house of, among other things. All of those prepositions take the dative case. So whatever comes just after them should go in the dative case. Often that will be a noun, could be an adjective with a noun as well, or a pronoun, and so on. Whatever it is that follows, that has to go in the dative case if it comes just after these prepositions. Like in this example, ich gehe mit meiner Familie. I'm going with my family. Meine Familie, that is all in the dative singular feminine form, precisely because it comes after the preposition mit, which means with and takes the dative case. That's quite a common preposition too, so you do need to be aware of this. Some prepositions then in German are also followed by the genitive case. Luckily, there are not many examples of this. They're quite a bit less common, especially for GCSE and iGCSE German. And those include trotz, wegen, trotz, which is despite, wegen, because of or due to, während, during, or anstatt, instead or instead of. So all of those would be followed by the genitive case in German. Luckily, they are somewhat less common, so you're less likely to come across prepositions that take the genitive case in German. But to give you an example, you'd say, trotz des Regens haben wir Fußball gespielt, for example. Despite the rain, we played football. Des Regens, that's the genitive. Because it comes after trotz, the word for rain goes into the genitive singular form. So every time you learn a preposition in German, try to memorize what case that preposition takes. That's important to be able to use that preposition correctly, particularly in speaking or in writing, because you need to know what case the words coming after the preposition must go into. Okay, now I'm just going to test your understanding of the case system in German. Okay, question number 1 in our quick quiz. What are the 4 cases in German? So hopefully a relatively simple one, just asking if you can recall what the 4 cases in German actually are. Let me show the answer for this. Okay, the 4 cases, of course, in German are the nominative, accusative, genitive, and dative. Knowing their names is definitely the first step. And then, of course, you need to know what they are, what they're used for, and potentially the endings as well. All of that is important for GCSE. Question 2, which is true or false. The accusative case is used for the grammatical object of any German sentence or clause. Try and remember what we said about that accusative case. And let me show the answer for this now. This one's definitely true. The object of a German clause or a sentence goes into the accusative case. Certain prepositions can also take the accusative case too. Number 3 is true or false again. Masculine and neuter singular nouns must change their endings when they're in the genitive case. So masculine and neuter singular nouns change their endings when they're in the genitive case. Again, I'll give you a bit of time to think. And let me show the answer. This is also true, actually. So masculine and neuter singular nouns must add the ending s or es when they are in the genitive case. That's one of the few instances where the noun itself must actually change, not just the words in front of the noun. And lastly, number 4, which cases can come after certain prepositions? Which cases could you find after prepositions in German? Okay, let me show you the answer. This one is the accusative, genitive, or dative cases. Largely, though, the accusative and dative cases, especially at GCSE level. The vast majority of prepositions will only take one of these 3 cases. So most prepositions would either take the accusative case or the dative case. That simply varies from preposition to preposition. When you're learning each preposition, you must try and learn which case it takes as well. A few prepositions, though, like the preposition in, most famously in German, can take more than one case. So in could take the accusative case or the dative case, and it changes its meaning according to which case it comes after. Yeah. Okay, if you've got questions about any of this tricky German grammar, or if you'd like to know about more personalized help and classes, which I do as well, you can get in touch with me through email, via Facebook, or Instagram. And I post on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn every day almost, sharing my love of languages with people, hopefully getting them to learn more and more languages, and giving them the techniques to be able to do that. And yeah, to make the process very enjoyable too. I do post a lot about exams, including GCSE exams too. So do follow me on those platforms. I have many resources, free resources particularly available too. And those include ones for German GCSE and iGCSE students. So you can contact me to get hold of those. And I do one-to-one classes, group classes, courses, and plenty more. So don't hesitate to reach out to find out more about any of that.